By the time Barry Kelly was 32, he'd already lived several lifetimes. Once a key enforcer for Liverpool's East Side Boys, a gang that ran heroin, crack and guns across Merseyside, Kelly had swapped the chaos of the streets for the monotony of prison life. But on May 25, 2025, that life came to an abrupt and unexplained end. Barry Kelly grew up in the hard edges of Liverpool, in neighbourhoods where poverty, pride, and gang culture mixed like fuel and flame. Violence wasn't shocking there, it was routine. And by the time he hit his mid-20s, Kelly wasn't watching from the sidelines anymore. He was deep inside it, part of the East Side Boys, a ruthless Merseyside crew run by brothers Jake and Callum Burrows. Kelly wasn't the kind to linger on street corners with a few raps in his pocket. He was ambitious, sharp, and unflinchingly loyal. Within a few short years, he'd climbed from small-time hustler to trusted insider, the kind of man who made things happen. Prosecutors would later call him the gang's link man, the thread connecting every part of their criminal enterprise. Drugs, guns, cash, intimidation. If it moved through the East Side Boys, Barry Kelly's fingerprints were somewhere on it. He was a fixer, a middleman, and a problem solver, the one who never flinched when the stakes were high. Barry Kelly's rise from a kid in Speak to a recognised name in Liverpool's underworld was fast, brutal, and built on blood money. The profits from drugs and guns fueled his climb, but they also dragged him deep into a world where every step forward came with a price. By the mid-2010s, South Liverpool was burning. Turf wars erupted across housing estates, each one bloodier than the last. The East Side Boys, led by the Burrows brothers, were determined to seize control of Speak's drug trade. Their rule was enforced not with words, but with fear and the echo of gunfire. Between 2016 and 2017, the violence spiraled out of control. 10 shootings rocked the community, leaving 13 people injured, one of them a toddler caught in a spray of bullets that shattered the calm of a quiet street. For families who had once known their neighbours, life had turned into a siege. Amid the chaos, Barry Kelly found his place. He wasn't just surviving the storm, he was helping to build it, smuggling Class A drugs, moving guns, and managing deals that kept the East Side Boys armed and dangerous. Kelly proved he was more than a foot soldier. He was reliable, ruthless, essential. Every weapon he shifted and every shipment he moved earned him more respect and more risk. By 2017, the young dealer from Speak had transformed into a key figure in a gang that ruled through violence, intimidation, and the constant threat of death. Under the iron rule of the Burrows brothers, the East Side Boys turned Liverpool streets into a marketplace of chaos, flooded with Class A drugs and high-caliber weapons. Their arsenal was staggering: a vintage St. Etienne revolver, a Tikka hunting rifle, multiple Smith & Wessons, sawn-off shotguns, and more. Some were stashed in lockups, others buried deep in the woodlands outside the city, insurance for the wars they knew were coming. But the centre of it all was Barry Kelly. He wasn't just another soldier, he was the courier of destruction, the man who moved guns like they were currency. From one side of the Mersey to the other, Kelly ferried weapons between suppliers and hidden caches, making sure the East Side Boys were never outgunned. When a rival crew challenged their territory, Kelly became the gang's lifeline. Through a dangerous network of contacts, he linked up with Christopher Wallace, a bomb maker from the Wirral, known for his homemade pipe bombs and illicit firearms. With Wallace supplying the tools of war and Kelly coordinating the flow, the East Side Boys were locked in an arms race that turned Liverpool's backstreets into battlegrounds. But it wasn't just firepower that kept the gang alive, it was drugs. The East Side Boys built their empire on heroin and crack cocaine, smuggled in from other cities and pushed on street corners across Merseyside. Hidden behind ordinary doors were stash houses, packed with drugs, money, and weapons. When they ran out of space, they turned to cuckooing, taking over the homes of vulnerable residents and using them as bases of operation. To outsiders, they were just another gang, but inside that world, men like Barry Kelly weren't just surviving, they were thriving, feeding off the violence that kept their empire alive. In the heart of Speak, a quiet family home on Eastern Avenue had become one of the East Side Boys' most vital strongholds. It belonged to Lee Price, a trusted member of the gang who had transformed his modest house into a drug hub, a place where runners came and went all hours, collecting packages and dropping off cash. But what looked like an ordinary suburban home soon turned into a battlefield. One night, a rival crew launched a drive-by shooting, spraying bullets through the property in a show of power and defiance. The gunfire ripped through walls and windows, sending shockwaves through the neighbourhood. Families hid behind furniture, children screamed, and the once quiet street became a war zone. Every burst of violence brought the East Side Boys closer to collapse. Merseyside police were already watching, and with each new attack, their focus sharpened. On the streets, the gang moved like ghosts, darting through back alleys on unlicensed scrambler bikes, cutting across parks and estates where police cars couldn't follow. Dealers used these off-road routes to make fast drops, vanishing into the maze of housing blocks before patrols could close in. But the police adapted quickly. New public space protection orders gave them power to seize the bikes outright. Special off-road units were deployed to chase down dealers on their own turf. Still, the gang fought to stay one step ahead, using burner phones, coded messages, and dead drops to keep their network alive. Yet no matter how carefully they tried to vanish, their violence left a mark. Every shooting, every overdose, every weapon pulled from the streets pointed back to the same web, and the name kept surfacing: Brian Kelly. The police were closing in. By early 2017, the streets of Speak had reached a boiling point. The gunfire, the bodies, the fear. It couldn't be ignored any longer. Merseyside police decided enough was enough. That decision sparked Operation Bombay, a covert mission designed to take down the East Side Boys and the empire they had built on drugs, guns, and intimidation. What began as a whisper would grow into one of the most ambitious and far-reaching investigations in Liverpool's history. It started quietly. Months of surveillance, wiretaps, and undercover work painted a picture of a criminal machine running with ruthless precision. Detectives tracked movements, monitored stash houses, and began to map out the chain of command, from teenage runners on the corners to the Burrows brothers sitting at the top. The house on Eastern Avenue was placed under watch. Officers documented the constant churn of activity, couriers slipping in and out, hand-to-hand exchanges at the door, men standing guard through the night. Every small detail built a bigger picture. Then came the breakthrough: the community itself. After years of silence, some residents of Speak began to talk. Anonymous tips trickled in: names, vehicles, drop locations. It was an act of defiance in a place where grassing could cost you your life. And it worked. In January 2018, the first strike landed. Police stormed the Eastern Avenue property, seized drugs and cash, and boarded it up. A symbolic blow that sent a message across Liverpool's underworld. The game was changing. Over the next year, Operation Bombay intensified. Raids spread across South Liverpool, targeting stash houses, safe flats, and rural hideouts. Each hit stripped away another layer of the gang's protection. Then came the shock tactics. In one bold show of force, armed matrix units rolled through Speak in convoy, lights flashing, engines roaring, a calculated display to remind the gangs who really controlled the streets. Behind the spectacle, detectives worked tirelessly to build an unbreakable case. Fingerprints on seized weapons, DNA recovered from bullet casings, and phone records linking Barry Kelly to Christopher Wallace's bomb-making network. Every fragment of evidence brought them closer to tearing the organization apart. By May 2019, the investigation reached its breaking point. Before dawn, coordinated raids exploded across Merseyside and beyond. Doors were smashed open, flash grenades lit up the darkness. Armed officers stormed safe houses in unison. Barry Kelly was taken down alongside the Burrows brothers, Lee Price, and dozens of others caught in the web of the conspiracy. Across the river on the Wirral, police closed in on Christopher Wallace, the gang's bomb maker. Inside his garage, officers discovered a chilling arsenal: loaded handguns, a sawn-off shotgun hidden in the grass near an associate's home, and several pipe bombs capable, prosecutors said, of killing or maiming anyone nearby. But the violence wasn't the only thing unearthed. Raids turned up bricks of heroin and cocaine, bags of cannabis, and stacks of cash, the blood-soaked profits that had kept the East Side Boys' empire alive. After 2 years of relentless investigation, Operation Bombay had done what once seemed impossible. The gang's hierarchy had been dismantled, its soldiers locked up, and its war for control brought to an end. For the people of Speak, it was more than a police victory. It was a moment of release. The fear that had gripped their streets for years was finally beginning to fade. The collapse of the East Side Boys triggered one of the largest prosecutions in Liverpool's history. In the months that followed, Barry Kelly and 21 others were brought before a Liverpool Crown Court to face justice. The case was vast, a criminal empire laid bare. Prosecutors detailed how the network trafficked drugs across county lines, hoarded firearms for street warfare, and even plotted to smuggle contraband into prisons. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, surveillance footage, and witness testimony painted an unshakable picture of a gang built on violence and greed. Many, including Kelly, chose to plead guilty, knowing the fight was lost. Others went to trial and lost anyway. When the verdicts came down, the message was unmistakable. Together, the defendants received over 200 years in prison, a crushing blow that underlined the scale and severity of their crimes. Each sentence reflected a place in the hierarchy, from the foot soldiers on the streets to the men who ran Liverpool's underworld from the shadows. At the top sat Christopher Wallace, the bomb maker whose garage was a ticking time bomb. He was handed life in prison with a minimum of 31 years, his cachet of guns and pipe bombs branded an extreme danger to the public. Gang bosses Jake and Callum Burrows, once feared across Speak, were sentenced to 25 and 20 years, their reign brought to an abrupt end. Lee Price, who turned his home into the gang's armory, received 22 years. Prosecutors revealed he'd been in contact with the Burrows brothers the very day they met Wallace to buy weapons. Finally, Barry Kelly, just 26, faced his fate. A trusted operator in the network, he'd moved heroin, cocaine, and guns, even plotting to smuggle contraband into prison. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 years. A harsh but inevitable end for a man so deeply tied to Liverpool's underworld. Kelly pleaded guilty to a long list of charges, from Class A drug trafficking to firearms offences and prison smuggling. The judge called his crimes calculated and deliberate. His sentence, 18 years in prison. When Operation Bombay ended, Merseyside police hailed it as a turning point. In the 600 days that followed, serious violence in Speak plummeted. Not a single gunshot was recorded. For a community once ruled by fear, peace had finally returned. But for Barry Kelly, that peace would never come. His story was no longer written on Liverpool's streets. It would continue behind prison walls. Barry Kelly's life behind bars became a slow fade from chaos to routine. The once feared gang lieutenant was now just another inmate, moving through Britain's prison circuit. Hindley first, then G as his security level shifted. In time he was sent north to HMP Kirk Levington Grange, a quiet resettlement prison where men were meant to prepare for life after crime. By 2025, Kelly had served 6 years of his 18-year sentence. At 32, he was still young enough to imagine a second chance, if he could keep his head down. But destiny, as always in his story, had other plans. On May 25, 2025, inside HMP Kirk Levington Grange, staff discovered Kelly dead in his cell. The official statement from the prison service was short, almost cold. A fatality in custody had occurred, and as per protocol, the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman would investigate. No cause of death was released. No details were given. For a man who had once moved guns and drugs across Liverpool's underworld, the silence felt heavy, and it didn't take long for whispers to spread. Behind bars, rumours circulate fast. Some said Kelly had been keeping his head down, serving his sentence without trouble. Others suggested he still carried dangerous knowledge, secrets about the East Side Boys' weapons pipeline, or the bomb maker Christopher Wallace, whose pipe bombs had once terrorised Merseyside. Was it a medical emergency, suicide, or something darker? A score settled years after the streets went quiet. Back in Speak, those who remembered him weren't sure what to believe. To some, Kelly was a product of his environment. a kid swallowed up by a world where loyalty was currency and violence the only language that mattered. To others, his death felt like the inevitable final chapter of a life built on crime and fear. What's certain is this: Barry Kelly's story didn't end with a judge's gavel. It ended in the shadows, in a locked cell hundreds of miles from home, under circumstances still shrouded in mystery. The official investigation may yet reveal what happened that night, but for now all that remains are unanswered questions and the haunting sense that, even behind bars, the reach of Liverpool's underworld is never truly broken. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.